All right, well, we waited long enough. We're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon and welcome to our latest Hawkeye Parent and Family webinar. My name is Lisa and I work in the Office of Academic Support and Retention and will be the moderator for today's webinar. If you are unfamiliar with our webinars, they are hosted on the first Friday of each month from noon to 1. We hope that each one provides you with up-to-date information that may apply to your students' transition to the University of Iowa. We know that parent and family members play a vital role in student success, and we hope that these webinars provide a platform for us to provide you with resources that help you support your students in their success. If you can't attend every live webinar, we do record these and post them later on both our website and on our YouTube page. Additionally, we'll have all links presented in the webinar will be sent out after the presentation and also be in the video's description online. For more information, future topics, or to sign up for more webinars, you can just please visit our website is parents.uiowa.edu and just click on the resources tab. Each webinar has a short presentation and then a question and answer portion at the end where you can get your questions answered by our campus experts. Now, today's webinar is Academic Support Resources, and it's actually hosted by my very own office, which is the office that presents these, Academic Support and Retention. So we are lucky to have two of my wonderful colleagues with us today. We have Mira Anson, who's the Director of Academic Support and Retention, and we have Lisa Kelly, who is one of our Assistant Directors for Academic Support and Retention. So both will share information on what campus resources are available to your students to help them excel academically and how you can best support the academic success of your student. We will go ahead and start off with Mira. Go for it.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And again, as Lisa shared, my name is Mira, and I will be moderating today's session with my colleague, Lisa.
Yes, hello.
So we have 4 objectives for our session today. Oh, can I get through the next screen? Yeah, there we go. So the first one, we want to talk first and foremost about fostering positive academic behaviors. Number 2, provide an overview of academic support options at the University of Iowa. And then, of course, number 3, how to find these academic support options. And then 4, how your student can utilize them to the max benefit possible. But before we really go into a lot of details about this, we wanted to really kind of take a step back and take our broader view for a second and discuss how really academic support is just one critical piece of the puzzle of student success. So we know that seeking academic support is certainly critical. It's just really part of a toolbox. So we know that other academic or other support resources may include different offices or campus resources related to social, personal, or financial considerations as students transition to and progress through college. So just to have some sort of sense that everything is really interrelated, and we're happy to talk about really kind of anything as questions may arise just about holistic student success. But our focus for the next several minutes will certainly be on academic support options and positive academic support behaviors.
So one of the things we wanted to talk about from the parent's perspective is how to help your students basically seek out and be proactive in finding their own help around the university. We're a big university, but there's lots and lots of resources. But because we're a big university, it's important that the students feel confident to seek out resources on their own and to be proactive when they need help. So the first message that we want to make sure that you can help us by presenting to your students is to be proactive in utilizing resources. You know, if you're struggling in a class or they don't understand an assignment, the best thing they can do is go talk to their professors, talk to their teaching assistants or TAs as soon as possible so that they can clear up misunderstandings and they can feel like they know what's going on. The instructor is not going to check in with every single student and say, how are you doing on this? You know, it's up to the students to work with the faculty on that. Students need to kind of think about developing a network of support. And this can be friends, this can be upperclassmen that took classes before they did. It can be people in their student organizations or their Greek organizations. It can be campus partners, offices on campus, people that they feel comfortable with, RAs, residential life people. And it can be, most importantly, it can be faculty and graduate students. As students progress through college, they're going to be looking for things like letters of recommendation. They're going to be looking for faculty to kind of to work with them on research projects and things. So starting early, even especially freshman year, with developing these habits and getting to know people on campus will make them feel like they're more of a part of the Hawkeye community and will feel confident in their ability to seek out help when they need it. Another thing that you can help them kind of message with them is to practice constructive academic behaviors. And in a second, we'll talk more specifically about what those behaviors are. And to seek out help when needed. So many students say, well, I started struggling and then I just kind of gave up because I didn't know what to do. But, that first beginning of struggle is the time where students can really seek out help and make sure there's so many resources available. But again, it's incumbent on them to seek out those resources. And we talk a lot here at the university about resiliency, about bouncing back when you face a struggle. If you have a strong sense of resiliency, a small obstacle like a bad homework grade or a bad quiz grade is something that you can overcome and learn how to grow from that. If students are weak in resiliency, they tend to let those small things overpower them and make them feel like incapable of moving forward. So as parents, that's a great thing you can talk to your students about, is how to develop that sense of resiliency and how to think about putting things in perspective and bouncing back from small setbacks. Every single college student faces small setbacks, but it's how they react to those that can determine what kind of student they're going to be going forward. So let's talk a little bit more about some specific academic behaviors that you can help your student learn how to do, and so they can be successful. So we call this How to Excel at Iowa. When they came to orientation, we did a lecture, our office did a lecture for them. And this is a lot of the things we covered in that lecture. So these are things your students heard from our lecture, from other orientation activities, from their On Iowa activities, and hopefully throughout their time at Iowa with campus partners. A very simple thing is getting sleep and exercising. Tends to be when we're stressed, we forget about those things, but when we're stressed, those are the most important things we can do. If they have a test coming up, going to sleep might actually make the difference between being awake enough to take the test and not. So maybe not cramming all night, but actually going to sleep and trusting that they've done the work. Not forgetting to exercise, even if it just means walking across campus when you're stressed out. That's a great way to de-stress and to feel better, is to take care of yourself physically. We know that students who are involved on campus tend to get higher GPAs and tend to feel more a part of the university. So whether that's joining student organizations, getting an on-campus job for maybe 10 to 15 hours a week, or doing research with professors, doing things that can help them feel more connected to the university, that tends to increase their ability to want to stay here and to feel more connected. And then there's the academic behaviors. We've discovered through research that there's basically 3 or 4 things students can do, and if they do those things consistently, they're going to do well in class. And that's actually going to class. It sounds silly, but that's really important. When they have the choice about how they can fill their time, going to class is really important. And then once they go to class, actually taking notes. And I know one thing that I've discovered through some research projects and just from anecdotal evidence is, most students have laptops now, but it turns out that taking notes by hand is actually much more effective than taking notes on the computer. And I think the reason for this is we can type really, really fast, especially students now. So when they type their notes, they tend to write everything almost like a transcript. But in reality, if you're handwriting your notes, you can't handwrite as fast as someone can talk. So you have to synthesize and think about whether something's useful to write down. And in doing that, they're actually being more of an active listener and paying more attention to what's going on. And they can then evaluate between what's important and what's less important as they take notes. If you type everything, you tend to get a great transcript, but they have no way of differentiating after the fact what information was more important or less important. So I've started encouraging students, especially in the classes that they're struggling with, is take notes by hand and really pay attention to listening to the faculty and not just trying to get everything down, because that's actually not going to help them in the long run. Another thing that's really useful for students to do is complete readings before class. Your students get syllabi for every class. They know exactly what's due for each class. If they complete the readings before class, then the class becomes more about reviewing what they've read and making connections between what they've read and what other course materials are presented. If they're trying to use the lecture to then figure out the readings, they're constantly coming behind, as we say, behind the 8 ball. They're trying to constantly kind of react to things instead of be proactive. And plus, if they've done the reading before class, it's yet another time to get familiar with the material. And then if they have questions, they can ask those in class instead of having to wait until they're lost. And then after class, and this is the hardest part, I'll admit, it was hard for me as a student. I'm sure it's hard for your students, but taking time after class to review their notes, to fill in the gaps of what they might have missed, talking to friends, talking to their faculty, and just kind of mentally and physically just going back over the notes, maybe recopying them or then typing them up if their handwriting is like mine, and doing that relatively quickly after class so they remember what they wrote. Those are all ways of engaging the short and the long-term memory and getting this material into their heads so that they constantly are using it. If you continue to review materials basically daily, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, then you don't have to cram as much for tests. So we're always trying to encourage students to do the work throughout the semester so they're not doing this sort of stereotypical college cram session. And then another thing we have at the University of Iowa is something called ICON, and this is where students find all of their due dates, all of their deadlines. They can often take quizzes and tests right from ICON. Your students are well aware of ICON. It's used in just about every class, but it's really important that they log into ICON every day to keep up with deadlines, to know when things are happening, and to see course information. A funny note, your students' teachers can actually see how often they've logged in. So if your student is not logging into ICON, their faculty know that, and that may impact their grade. So another thing you can encourage them to do is make sure they're checking in with this on a daily basis so they know what's coming up in their classes. We're going to show a short video right now, and this is a video our office made about a year ago, and it's on good general study skills and behaviors, and it features some faculty members and some current students talking about how to be a good student.
Hold on a second. While we've never played a video before in our webinar before. So okay, here we go. Let's see if we got it.
Sometimes the amount of studying that goes into a college course can seem overwhelming. Students can spend hours on end studying course material, usually ending in frustration and lack of focus. Cramming isn't efficient and should be avoided when planning ahead. The idea we are introducing to you in this video is the concept of studying smarter, not harder. One way to become an effective studier is to establish a consistent timeline to help you stay on track with studying before large tests and assignments. Timelines can incorporate daily reviews. Research shows doing some sort of review the day you learn material can help increase your ability to remember that material significantly. Weekly reviews. Taking your daily reviews and crafting them into a weekly review in the form of study guides and review sheets. Pre-exam reviews. The final checks over the material covered on the exam. When incorporating daily and weekly reviews into this review, then no cramming should be necessary.
We want students to do well in their study. We want success and achievement to be a part of all college students' narrative. We want you to aspire to study your best. What does it mean to aspire? Let's break it down for you. A. Approach. Approach your work with a positive attitude. Think about where your studies will be most efficient, so look for a space where you can get comfortable, a place you can stay focused, and approach your work effectively. S. Select. Select what you want to study. It is best to study in chunks. You won't get all done at once. When selecting material, look for headings, graphics, pre- and post questions for an overview, and scan for keywords and vocabulary. P. Piece together. Start to piece together what you are studying. Try putting your books and notes aside and summarize the information you just learned, and then return the materials and determine the areas you still need to study. I. Inquire. Inquire or ask questions about things that you don't understand. You can look at other books or websites, ask your instructor, or talk to other students in the class. R. Reflect. Reflect on your understanding of the material. You can do this by taking practice quizzes or doing practice problems, explaining the material to a friend, or explaining concepts out loud. E. Evaluate. Evaluate your understanding of the material. This can be reflected in your grades on tests and assignments, But think about your progress, your previous study plans, and explore more options if you haven't reached your goal yet.
One of the best things to remember in developing study skills is to start studying early. Cramming not only proves to be ineffective, it can lead to other negative behaviors such as lack of sleep, poor eating habits, stress, and overall frustration. We hope the skills provided for you in this video give you the opportunity to aspire to be your best.
And we're not sure how that showed up for you, so bear with us. We apologize. We're not sure if it showed up well or not, so just keep in mind that, sorry, we're doing multiple things at once. Just keep in mind that we will have that posted online as well as the webinar, so if that didn't come through very well, you can watch it a little bit later. Thanks.
Thank you. So before we move into how to find resources and where to refer students to different resources, we wanted to talk first about how do we send messages to students about engaging in academic positive behaviors, but also too about using academic support. So we know that it can also be a struggle to sometimes get students to really see the relevance of going and to encourage them to go, but not only to go, but to engage once they're there. So some of the strategies that we found in our office that have been helpful regarding getting students to go to academic support resources and engage with that resource there be first and foremost tapping into intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So some of the intrinsic motivation factors really focus on what is the student learning? What is it that about them that they are benefiting from the content? What do they want to get out of this particular subject matter? Some more extrinsic factors may be things like grades or maybe someday to get that degree or to go into graduate or professional school, whatever that goal may be. So we find really working with students to think about both of those things because really the primary reason they're here is to learn and to develop both personally and socially and become prepared for a career or a job that is of interest to them. So tapping into both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation areas we find to be really helpful for a lot of students. And then of course developing realistic goals. I think something that we hear probably more often in the fall from new students as they transition to the University of Iowa is my GPA is not what I thought it would be, or my grades were not as high as they were in high school, or you know, to what degree can I find more individualized assistance, or maybe finding tutoring or academic support is different in college than it was in high school, or different at the University of Iowa than it was maybe at their previous institution if they started at a different college first. So I think it's really important to develop those realistic goals is that GPA, we do see that drop between high school and college, and that's okay. I think that that's something that happens to every student. So establish realistic goals, but also to sort of norm that for students so that way they know they are not the only ones, maybe with some sort of grade concerns or grade anxiety. Foster a sense of belief in themselves. Certainly this is, as you know, very important. It can be a difficult transition to college, especially not just academically, but you know, moving away from home for the first time. There's a lot really going on with the student, and oftentimes we'll work with a student, we'll say, gosh, I really don't know what I'm going to do next. Is this a fit for me? And so better communicating them to, yes, you can do this. You were admitted to the University of Iowa because you can be successful here. You can do this. And we're going to try to find different strategies and connect you with different resources so that way you can reach your goals. And sometimes they may be changing their goal or changing their major, really truly what is ever best for them. And then of course determining the gap. And this is an interesting one because if we look at these different questions, what we find when we're working with students sometimes is what their goals are, what they want to accomplish, and that may be in an individual course or it may be overall throughout a whole semester. How is that different from their behaviors? So for example, thinking about how do you want to spend your time? What matters to you? What are your academic goals versus or compared to how do you currently spend your time? So for example, if your student has a goal of getting an A or a B in a particular course, okay, well let's talk about how you're spending your time then. Are you studying at X number of hours for that course? Are you practicing positive academic behaviors that Lisa shared earlier to fill your time so that way we can increase your likelihood of success in that course? But then two, thinking about what's the same and what is different. And this is thinking primarily about a student's transition. So now that your student may be in their second semester at the University of Iowa, for example, what was different from their first semester? Or what's the same? Or what was different and or the same from high school? And how are they negotiating those differences? And then, of course, who has been their support person in the past? And who might those people might be now? You know, we certainly know that parents and families are great support partners in this. I think that something that students go through as they transition to college, too, is maybe they relied on a guidance counselor in high school or a certain teacher, and they come to college and they think, oh, my classes are different every semester. So how can I find a consistent person who I can go to here at the University of Iowa who can help me? And oftentimes that is their academic advisor, or it could be someone in a variety of different support offices, such as our office or the Office of the Dean of Students. And then, of course, how can we help students close that gap between what they want to do or what they're currently doing and what they want to do? So if they're really strategizing, so I mentioned the study example earlier, is if a student wants to get a certain grade in a course, what is that going to take? Could it be increasing study time? Could it be visiting that instructor in those instructor's office or drop-in hours? And what does that look like? So really coming back to those behaviors to help close the gap. And whenever we find when we engage in these discussions with students and ask these questions, it really gets them to think about how behaviors really are important. And sometimes that can help establish a real sense of urgency or a sense of importance for, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to try this out. It's a different strategy. I'm in a different place. But not only am I going to go, but I'm going to engage. I'm going to talk to my tutor or my supplemental instruction leader, and I'm going to ask questions, particularly if there was something in my note that I didn't understand, for example. So this next part, and Lisa touched on this a little bit earlier, was building resiliency. I always find this really fascinating. There's a whole growing body of research about resiliency in college students and how this is increasingly critical to college student success. I think a good way to frame resiliency might be looking at the ABC model. And what we see with a lot of students is that if they encounter a difficulty, so whatever their adversity may be, a lot of students will immediately connect that to a consequence. So they'll say, for example, oh, I got a bad grade on this test, so maybe the consequence is maybe I'll fail the course, or maybe I won't get my desired grade in this course. But often what we see is students forget about the B, they forget about the belief part. So if they get a bad grade on a test, well, let's stop for a second and think about, what do you believe this grade to mean? Does this grade mean that you are going to be able to seek academic support and make changes and incorporate behaviors? Do you believe in yourself that you can do this? Do you have realistic goals? Because really it's the belief that leads to the consequence, not the adversity itself. And so I think framing these conversations with students can be helpful to really refocus what's within your control as a student and what do you believe that you can do? Because we know that if students have a great high degree of self-efficacy or beliefs in themselves, they are more likely to accomplish their goals and bounce back.
So as I mentioned earlier, the university has lots and lots of resources available to help students. So we're going to talk now a little bit about how to find these resources and then how to refer your students to resources and then help them prepare for resources. One of the best places they can start if they're struggling in a class, or even if ideally they think they might be struggling in a class and want to get ahead of that, is to go to our tutor.iowa.edu website. And that or tutor.uiowa.edu is actually the website there. This is a great clearinghouse of all kinds of information about academic resources. On this page, and this is a screenshot of our site, you can search right there in the middle for a tutor or for academic support. So if you typed in Math 1005, which is one of our big math classes, you would then get a screen that shows all of the things available to help you in that class, some of which might be the Math Help Lab. It might be supplemental instruction, which I'll talk about in a second, and it might be private tutors. So right there, students can access lots of resources at this one website. Also on the website at the top, you'll see it says Find Help. And under that tab, you'll see, again, more information about some of our resources, but also on that tab, we have academic skills worksheets. So if students are struggling with note-taking or with memorizing things or with making 7-day plans for studying, those are just some of the resources. So these are usually 1 to 2 page documents with questions, with suggestions, tips and strategies about how to be a good student. And I love these because these were made primarily by students for students. So these are high achieving students who do have really good study skills and academic behaviors, and they've kind of quantified what they do to succeed and written it down for other students. So they're pretty simple, they're pretty straightforward, and there's about 20 or 25 different skills addressed in these worksheets. So again, if your students are kind of generally struggling or having trouble across multiple classes, the worksheets might be a great place. So let's move on to where to refer students for help. The number one place I really believe is their faculty or their teaching assistants. The faculty and the teaching assistants are the ones teaching the class. They're the ones who are determining the grade for the class, and they know best how to succeed in their class. Also, every faculty member and or graduate student TA has to have office hours where they drop-in hours where students can come by their office and talk to them. These are published in the syllabi, and they're also talked about in class. If no one shows up, the faculty's still there waiting, hoping that someone shows up. As someone who used to teach classes and will do so again in the future, I can't stress enough how important that is to go talk to your instructors or have your students talk to their instructors. And honestly, again, when I teach classes, I know that if students come to see me and we talk about their issues and we help them through problems and I get to know them, even if it's a class of 300 or 400 students, if I'm deciding, if they're kind of at that crossroads between, say, a B+ and an A-, the students that come to see their faculty are generally going to be the ones to get that benefit of the doubt versus the students who are just an anonymous person in the middle of the class. Also, those are the students who, when they need recommendation letters or I'm looking for a student to do a research project with me or to help me with something else, it's the students that seek me out and come to see me are the ones that I'm going to want to work with. So it's really a great idea, especially freshman year, to build that habit of going to talk to your faculty, having your students go talk to their faculty often, because that's a great way to build relationships and make a big school seem smaller. Though there are often students that say, well, I just don't understand the way the faculty person is teaching it to me, and I just want a different perspective. So that's when some of our other resources can be really helpful. For instance, we have basically several different kinds of tutoring. Across various departments on campus, there's help labs, and these are in most of our major departments like math, chemistry, biology, writing centers, speaking centers. And these are, again, you can find these all on the Tutor Iowa website, but these are all places where students can drop in and get help in a number of classes they're taking. Their hours vary. They're usually open into the evening, so if students have classes during the day, they can drop in the evening. And they're staffed typically by graduate students or very advanced undergraduate students who can help them in a number of classes. And these are free resources across campus that students can drop into to get help. We also have a fantastic program that is gaining in popularity every semester, and this is called supplemental instruction. And this is for about 20 of our biggest kind of freshman level, entry level classes. And this is where advanced students who've already taken the class and done very well, they attend class again with the current group of students, and then they work to create lesson plans, and they provide review sessions, which are basically review, enrichment, critical thinking, a deeper dive into the curriculum. And these are offered usually 2 or 3 times a week for any given class, sometimes more for a really big class. And they're typically offered at our Academic Resource Center, which is in the IMU. Again, students can find out if their class offers SI by going to the Tutor Iowa website or asking their professor. We know that students who attend SI on average, basically attending an hour of SI a week is equivalent to 2.5 hours of solo study. So if students are looking to maximize and be more efficient in their studying, attending SI can be really great for this. They don't have to be struggling, and they don't have to sign up for a certain number of times. They can drop in once. They can come all 15 weeks. They can do anything in between. So, and again, it's a free service offered to these students in these classes. And on average, students who attend SI once a week, again, this is an average, but we see that they're averaging 1/2 letter grade higher. So if they're going to get a B in a class without going to SI, if they attend SI once a week, the average grade becomes a B+. So for parents, for students, this is a really great resource. I think last semester we had something like 10,000 visits to SI. So students are using this a lot, and if your student says people aren't going, that's not true. People are going to this all the time, and they're really benefiting from it. So again, this is something they don't have to be struggling. A students go so they can increase their knowledge even more. So this is a good productive activity parents or students can do to help themselves. And then finally, we do have private tutors. This is the only thing that they would have to pay for. You can find the private tutors on the Tutor Iowa website. Basically, you just search for the class you're looking for a tutor for, and all the people who are qualified to be a tutor for that class will show up. What we do for private tutoring is kind of like a contract business. What we do is we vet the students who are the people who are private tutors. We know that they are affiliated with the university. They're either a current student, a graduate student, or a faculty or staff member. We know if they're a student, they've achieved an A in the class, and that they have a certain, like a 3.3 overall GPA. So we know they're a very good student. And we know, so basically we can vouch for the fact that they're qualified to be a tutor for that class. So they're only qualified to do certain classes, which can be a little bit, so sometimes finding tutors for every single class, we have a lot of them, but there are sometimes gaps. So we're always looking for more tutors. If you have students that want to be tutors, send them our way too. And then basically the student who wants to get a tutor would contract with the tutor. They would decide where they're going to meet, when they're going to meet, how often they're going to meet, and what the pay would be. And then they would pay that person directly. So that's where all of that kind of organization is between the student and the tutor. So basically we're just kind of a clearinghouse or a vetting system for them, but then they work that out themselves. But that can be a great way if they're just struggling in a few concepts or they need that one-on-one attention. A private tutor can be a way to really increase their help them to improve in classes and get the one-on-one help they might not be able to get even through supplemental instruction or drop-in tutoring. So then finally, where to refer. So let's look at helping your students prepare. So if students are going to go to tutoring or going to see their professor, they often don't know what to do to prepare for this. So if they're going to go, let's kind of talk in the frame of going to see their professors. They should bring their notes and their course materials with them, because a lot of times professors will want to say, let me see your notes. I want to see what kinds of things you're writing down when you attend lecture. So if they can bring those, the instructor can talk to them about different note-taking strategies or how to make sure they're getting the more important information. And so sharing their notes with their professors can be a way of the professor seeing what's going on in the student's head and how they're experiencing the course. And also if they have the books and materials there, as you're referencing questions, you can both be looking things up. They should also come prepared with questions or areas of discussion. It's really hard for faculty if you just come in and say, hey, I need help, and kind of stop there, because there's a lot going on in class. But if you can say, you know, I understood X, Y, and Z, but when we got to this new concept, that's when I started having trouble, then your faculty person or your tutor in this case can pretty easily figure out how to start helping you. So if they can figure out where they're having trouble or some particular questions they have, it's always best to go in with questions or some kind of an agenda about what they want to cover, because it's not possible in an hour to reteach, 8 weeks worth of class material, but it is possible to answer some specific questions and then kind of go from there. And they should come in expecting to learn. These conversations, tutoring sessions, office hours are about instruction. They're not about just talking and kind of learning about each other. It's about actually solving problems and figuring out how to do course material. So they should come in with an attitude of, I'm struggling, but I want to get better and I want to improve, and I want to learn new strategies to improve. Go in with an open mind, go in ready to try something new, go in ready to answer questions and have a dialogue, and then that'll make that most effective. So again, asking questions when they arise. This has kind of been a theme, but don't wait till you're tell your student, don't wait till they're really struggling, but go in often and make it a habit of asking questions about lecture. Make it a habit of trying to find out more about the information they're studying. I tell students a lot, when they're doing reading for a class, to write questions right there in their textbook, or if they didn't buy the textbook, to write it in notes so that they can, if they're reading something and they say, hey, that's really interesting, that relates to what we saw in lecture, take a note about that. Or I don't really understand this part, and they circle it and write a note, so that later they can use that as the basis for figuring out what their questions are. Because it's so hard when someone says, what questions do you have? And they don't know where to start. But if they've got questions already written from doing the reading, from their notes, they can start asking questions and becoming doing more participating in class, and or be able to go to meetings or tutoring or office hours and be more prepared. Faculty love to work with students, but if students come prepared, that's going to make faculty want to go the extra mile and help them, because this is someone who's truly doing their part to be a good student and not just waiting on someone to kind of spoon feed them information, which is harder to do from the faculty perspective.
All right. Thank you so much, Mira and Lisa, for all the great information on the variety of academic resources we have here and how to best support students in their academic journey. We will now move into our question and answer portion. Please remember that we have lots of people attending and we will try to get to everyone's question, but if we are unable to, we will go ahead and email you later, or you can email us. Remember that we are unable to answer questions about specifics on your student's experience due to FERPA, but we can provide information that may be helpful in guiding your student. So we will take a couple minutes just to see if we can get a couple questions, and then we'll start back up. All right, we have our first question. Mira is going to go ahead and read it for us and then address it.
Okay, so this is a great question that we didn't address in too much detail. The question is tutoring all held in one place? That is a great question. And certainly, we'll work with a lot of students who may be transferring from a different college where there is one centralized tutoring location. Here at the University of Iowa, however, we have 20 different campus help labs and centers, and they are located really all over campus in different buildings that are more associated with the subject area. So the best place certainly to start is, as Lisa mentioned earlier, going to Tutor Iowa. So if you were to Google Tutor Iowa or tutoriowa.uiowa.edu, then you can type in the course and then a list of options will come up. But that is a great question. So we do have a lot of different places. They're all spread out, which is definitely why getting connected to your Iowa is especially important. Okay, we have another question. Is there a way for a parent to know if their student is attending classes? That is another really great question. And then a related question here is, can a parent access ICON with the parent's login? Those are both very great questions that we get quite frequently. The answer really is it depends. So certainly when you came to orientation, I know that there were sessions on FERPA and what information could be shared with the student. Typically your parent would have to grant you access to log on to see information onto their MyUI account. In terms of seeing more granular detail about a student's attendance during course, or during classes, that's really between a student and their instructor. But a parent may be able to access that if they have guest access the ICON, depending upon the level of access and depending upon what an instructor may share on ICON. I don't know, Lisa, do you have any other thoughts?
I mean, again, it depends on kind of the relationship with your student. At around now, I think it was actually this week or at the end of last week, the university sends out a not attending list. So if students are truly not attending, they're going to get warned via their MyUI that they're not attending classes. And, so faculty and staff send that information so the university sees it, and then we can outreach to students who aren't attending class and to kind of see what's going on. But again, for parents, you'd have to have, the student would have had to sign off on you being able to see that information. And that's a discussion, it's a great discussion to have with your students about how much autonomy you want them to have and how much the sort of, how they can talk to you about struggling and about how they're doing in classes. And so we do kind of track that information, but it's more of an internal thing for the students and for the campus partners and for the faculty. And so parents have to kind of, I guess, trust that the students will talk to them about it, or talk to their students about signing off on accessing that information.
All right, we have another one. Ready?
Okay, my other question is, and this is also a good one to think about, particularly if we're looking at helping students develop a certain skill set that isn't related to a specific class. But this question is, where can my student go for help with just general skills related to writing? So we do have a writing center on campus that students can utilize for a variety of different courses. And what's interesting about this, I mentioned, is we have 20 different campus help labs, and a lot of them are, or most of them are connected to a certain content area. So I think that what we'll find is a student will think, well, I'm going to look up a resource for this class, and they'll go connect with a different campus help lab or a resource. But certainly many of them really have more cross-functionality, I think, than we might assume. So I think the Writing Center is a great place for students to go and get connected, and a place that they can continuously use for a variety of courses. There's also another center called the Speaking Center, which is very helpful too for students if they're preparing presentations or different assignments that would require a little bit more of a verbal skill set in terms of communicating ideas, etc.
And the writing and both the writing and speaking lab are things that are available for students, graduate students, and faculty, so they're well used across campus. And it's not a place you go for like simply just remedial help, but people go with their articles they're publishing or their dissertations. So we really take writing help really seriously, and good writers always work with other writers. So we want to kind of promote that as a place to go to become even better, and not just necessarily a place to go when you're struggling.
All right, we have another one here.
This next question, have you heard of, is it chegg.com? chegg.com has a resource and any insight. I have heard of it, and I have heard of some students that say it helped them. I think it really just depends upon what the student's looking for. I think we would always encourage a student to look first and foremost at resources that are here at the University of Iowa, particularly resources that are free at the University of Iowa. So the first stop would be really connecting to a faculty or an instructor or a TA or a campus help lab or our office, going to Tutor Iowa, seeing what's here first. Because certainly a majority of those resources, with the exception of private tutors, are free. And they're also really connected to a course. Whereas I think there's a lot of great external resources out there to use. External resources don't necessarily have the knowledge about course-specific needs as the institution may. So starting here first, but then if it really becomes more broader and saying, does your student need more assistance with just general skills or other assistance that may go beyond the university, what the university can offer, then that could be your resource. But I would encourage that the student touch base with either our office first or their academic advisor or their faculty and instructor to really explore some resources first. I hope that addressed the question.
Yeah, I know some faculty are going so far as to kind of cultivate lists of outside resources that they do publish under like supplemental readings or additional information. And so that's kind of things that students have, or the faculty have already kind of vetted and know that's really good. So certainly encouraging students to kind of look closely at their syllabi or at their course icon site to see if the faculty has already posted some additional resources instead of necessarily going outside to just find whatever might be available on the internet, which may or may not be vetted.
Okay, so this next question, are there any student mentor programs for students? Yes. The University of Iowa has several different student mentor programs, and a lot of them have really grown to become major specific. So I'm thinking of different programs in engineering. I'm thinking of WISE, particularly for women in engineering, different programs within the Tippy College of Business. And so there's different pockets of them. There is a great mentoring program that's been around for I think a couple of years out of the Center for Diversity and Enrichment. There's different programs through International Students and Scholar Services that help connect students with other students. So really it just depends upon if your student is looking for something that's major or career specific, or maybe if they're looking for a mentor or establishing some sort of social integration with another group of students who they may feel more comfortable with. Something that our office has been asked quite a bit is what about student mentors or student assistants or peer assistants for students who need help with general study skills. So if it's more about time management or different approaches to reading or note-taking. We do have some students who work in our office that served as Hawkeye guides. They served as student leaders during orientation. And then we employ those students throughout the academic year or a small group of those students so they can provide more individual assistance to students regarding those skill sets. So that is yet another option, and if that's something that you'd like to connect your student with, just let us know, and then we will do some outreach.
All right, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up for today. I want to thank Mira and Lisa again for joining us. Remember that all our webinars are recorded and then posted online at our website. It's uc.uiowa.edu/family resources. Usually I'm the one who does that, and I tend to have it up within the hour. We will also include that link to that video that was in the presentation just in case it didn't come through very well, so you can see that as well. Remember, if you were unable to get your question answered or if you have any follow-up questions that you think of, you can go ahead and email us. We're at uc-retention@uiowa.edu. It'll be the same email address that you got a reminder from, so you can just always respond to that one. And then finally, we just want to remind you of our next webinar. It's in April, and it's called Exploring Summer Jobs and Internships. It will be hosted by the Pomerantz Career Center and the Office of Student Employment, so it should be a good one. We want to thank you again for joining us today. On Iowa, go Hawks!